All right. Hello, can you hear me? Can you hear me? Miss Benita, can you hear me?
Uh-huh.
You can hear me now?
You're fine.
Okay. All right. All right. I wasn't sure. All right. Um, yeah, I apologize. I for whatever reason I was thinking Central Time, and
Eastern.
yeah, yeah. So I was
Yeah, I can
getting.
hear you. We're live.
Oh, okay. All right. Yeah. Well, I apologize. I was getting this confused with something else that was on Central Time, and so that's what the issue is. Um,
Uh-huh.
and I clicked the link, but it took me
Okay.
to, the
All right.
YouTube.
All right.
Yeah.
Let's
All right.
I think I sent you the wrong one. All right, let me play the intro. Hopefully it'll play right. Everybody bear with me for a second. I seem to be having technical difficulties.
Um, I don't know. Can you?
Bear with me 1 second.
Okay.
It's on my end. Hmm.
Live talk with Anita Brad.
Welcome to Live Talk with Bonita Bradley. I don't know what's going on with my devices. Hold on, guys. Can you all hear me? If you can hear me, let me know. If you can't, let me know as well.
Okay. I can't hear you now. I don't know if you're speaking or not.
Can you hear me now?
Okay, I can hear you now.
You can hear me now? Okay, good.
Yeah.
All right. So you all let me know in the comments if you can hear me. Those that are watching, let me know if you can hear me and if you can see me okay, please. That would really help me out. My devices are going haywire this evening for some reason. So help me out and let me know if you can hear me okay. If you're not, let me know that as well. Okay. All right. So this evening we have another awesome guest. He goes by the name of Khanclusions. We're going to get into how he got that name and how he came up with that name and all of that good stuff. And so that we are not running over our allotted time tonight, welcome, Mr. Khanclusion. It's your first time to Live Talk with Bonita. I'm happy to have you here. Why don't you introduce yourself to our audience?
Right. Yeah, thanks for having me. So, my name is Khanclusions. That is a name that I've chosen. It started kind of as a rap name of Khan, but then I wanted to kind of have conversations and discussions, and I considered conversations, but that was taken, so I just started with Khanclusions. But yeah, I am a soldier, but anything I say is not. I do not speak on behalf of the DoD. I am a part-time National Guard. I fairly recently graduated law school and just waiting on bar results. My history as far as career-wise, I spent a lot of time doing community work, community outreach. I was community organizer in New Orleans for years, um, community outreach advocate, just a lot of things concerning that. Most recently, before I attended law school, I worked for a public defender's office in Alabama, where I was an investigator for a little over 3 years, almost 4 years. Then I decided to go to law school, and right now doing stuff on the side, kind of trying to be creative and do things like that, and um, you know, maybe building an online presence. We'll see.
All right. Thank you so much, and thank you for your service. Um, Also, church and community development, where you were trying to bring the church and the community together. You worked on some projects of that nature. And you gave me an example of one project you worked on. Um, do you want to share that one?
Yeah, sure, I can. I'll try to make it quick since I've, and I apologize for that, by the way. But I was a community organizer, and what we used to do, I used to work for an organization called PICO, which was a national organization. They now changed the name to Faith in Action. But what we did is that as organizers, we would go into communities and we would build relationships with the churches because the belief was that all great movements started in the church. And so we would meet with a pastor and build a relationship. They would join the organization, and we would try to develop leadership within that church and within the community. And so we would listen to the people, do meetings with them, meet with 15 to 20 people a week, see what issues were important to them, and then try to work on those issues, and in the process develop leadership. And one example of that was there was this one community in Louisiana. It was called Shrewsbury, which is like kind of outside of Metairie for anybody that's familiar with it. And it's a kind of a small community, but one thing that the people always complained about was that kids weren't in school. Kids were in school, and of course there was a crime issue in that neighborhood. And we found out that there was some internal localized political dynamics between some of the churches and the community, because there was a highway that split it, and it was an interesting thing concerning the mentalities. But one thing we decided to do first was to bring the community together. So we had a block party. We invited school board members. We gave out free supplies, things like that, because we really wanted them to understand the benefit of bringing the community together. The next thing we did was is that we found out through our conversations with people in the community that there was a gym in that community, and that gym was run by Parks and Recreation, and for whatever reason it wasn't open during the day, and they had no air conditioning in the summer, so it was extremely hot. But most of the day it wasn't open, and there were people that worked there, they just didn't have it open. And so me and the developing leaders in the community went and met with the city councilman for that area and Parks and Rec. And in that meeting, they agreed to give us or give to the gym. They allocated like $250,000 to renovate the gym, not just for the air conditioning. They also donated 12 more computers, and they said that they would make sure that the gym was open. And it's one thing to meet with politicians and officials behind closed doors, but we made sure that they would make that a same agreement and those same commitments to the community at large. And so we had an event out in the gym, and 150, 200 people were there, and we had them commit to that same thing that they committed to us in private, to everybody in public, so we could hold them accountable. And they followed through. They had, you know, they renovated the gym and everything. But the month after that, just from the gym being open, the crime rate in that neighborhood dropped 75% because
Wow.
kids had something to do.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. That's impressive. That's impressive. That's impressive. And then you also um you did some work with some local pastors in that area as well.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. The pastors
Yes.
were instrumental in that movement as well. They were instrumental in being a part of that and driving that. There was
Mhm.
also larger issues around crime and healthcare that we also worked on, because the whole point of that was to build a relationship and coalition amongst pastors in the faith community. And it was regardless
Mhm.
of denomination, regardless of race. We had Catholics, we had Baptists, we had, white, black, Asian. We really wanted to represent the diversity of the city. And I think we did a good job with that.
Mhm.
Mhm.
So was it difficult to get all of those religions to come together?
Um, the difficult part about it wasn't so much the religious differences, it's really just the
Uh-huh.
individual dynamics, I think, in terms of the communities and what the pastors and priests are looking for. Because,
Okay.
and I'm sure that you probably know this firsthand, is that, some pastors are driven and motivated by different things,
Right.
so when we pitch, to some, like, hey, we want to try to help bring people together to work in the community. Some people may
Right.
not necessarily be motivated by that. They're not. They may.
Right.
Some people are motivated by, how is this going to benefit my church.
Right.
So
What
it
am I
can
going to get
really.
out of it?
Right. And so it's
Mhm.
it was the most difficult thing was, I think, that, and getting them to buy in and then believe. And to be honest,
Mhm.
there were some pastors that were more cynical. They just like, nothing's gonna change. I'm not
Really?
gonna bother. Yeah, that was, I will say, in that
Mhm.
my time doing that work, that was probably the most difficult thing, was like trying to combat the complacency and the cynicism.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Hmm.
Hmm.
All right. So let's get a little personal.
Okay.
So you joined the military, and something happened to you as soon as you joined the military that probably would have had most people ready to go home and call it quits. But you didn't.
Right.
So
Yeah.
your
So.
first day, your first week, tell us what
Mhm.
happened.
So first day, basic training, and before you go to basic, they have you, hold up in reception, is what they call it, where you're just waiting to ship to basic training. Excuse me. And I'll just throw this in because I think it's an important part of the story, is that I did before I shipped to basic and I was at reception, I did pray, to God, like, hey, make me, better, stronger, wiser from going through this experience. And I was in pretty good shape at the time. I felt like, I could do it. I wouldn't
Now,
have any problems. I was
Con,
prepared for it.
Con,
Hmm.
Con, let me interrupt you right quick. Con,
Okay.
let me interrupt you. Tell them what was going on that led you to join the military.
Right. Okay. I got you.
Yeah, because
So,
we skipped that.
okay. So I had lost my job, and this was, in part, this was the tail end of the recession. And
Hmm.
I had lost my job, and I was out of work for a while. And I have a degree. I had a degree, I had a grad degree in psychology. And it was, with my community organizing background, I was struggling to find work at the time. And my wife's degree is in marketing. She was also, just working part time. So it was a challenge. So moved back to Alabama, struggling. I had some near hits, but not enough. Couldn't land it. And so my wife ended up pregnant. And, there was a question of, all right, what are we going to do? And so I signed up to join the military. And, initially I was going to go active duty, but I got in touch with a National Guard recruiter first. And so it was really a somewhat of a desperation move on my end.
Hmm.
Um, and so, yeah, I joined. I'd never thought I would join the military. I had friends and family that did. And I just felt like it wasn't for me at the time, but everybody that knew me was like, "Oh, you're gonna love it." So fast forward, I've shipped off. I'm shipped off. I am at reception, and at the very least, I feel like I'm gonna try to make the best of this experience.
Hmm.
So I first day, first event, basic training, Fort Jackson, South Carolina. We're at a obstacle course, and again, I'm in good shape, really good shape, and so I'm like, this is not going to be a problem. And the drill sergeant says, "Hey, you jump over this wall just to demonstrate to everybody else how to do it." And
Hmm.
so I do it thinking, and this wall is like 3 feet high. It's not that tall, maybe 4 feet. And I jump over the wall, no problem. But I land, and when I land, I hyperextend my leg, and I feel it and hear it crack in 3 places. And
Mm.
I'm on the ground instantly in pain, and the drill sergeant comes over. He looks over the wall, and he's like, "Watch out! There's a ditch over there." So there was a ditch on the other side that people had worn in the hole in the ground, basically. And I hit the side of that ditch, which is
Mm-hmm.
why my leg hyperextended. So
Wow.
um, yeah, it was. And you want to talk about the thought of being injured because I was in good shape and I played football for years and never really got hurt. It never crossed my mind. And so,
Mm-hmm.
because I needed it so bad, I was like, this is just terrible. This is the worst thing.
Mm-hmm.
And um, they have somebody stay with me. I'm limping. I'm trying to finish the obstacle course. And the first sergeant sees me and he comes over and he chews me out because he thinks I'm faking. Because his first day
Mm-hmm.
in, he chews me out. Then the battalion commander sees me and he comes over and he chews me out and he threatens to send me home. And I'm like, sir, look, I can't afford to go home. And he was like, well, you better finish this obstacle course or you'll go home in 14 days, which wasn't really true because they tend to keep you there longer. But yeah,
Mm-hmm.
it chewed me out. So I finished that obstacle course and I didn't find out what was wrong. They had a physical therapist look at me and she was like, oh, your leg, it's fine. And I downplayed it. And then I stayed on it for like one day. And, I
Mm-hmm.
couldn't even do real facing movements because it felt like my knee was coming apart.
Mm.
And yeah, it was bad. I had the top bunk and everything. So it was like, I was in pain that whole day. I think the second day, the third day, I went
Mm-hmm.
to sit what they call sick call. And so I went to see the physical therapist, PT, and she, rolls up my pants leg and she looks at it and it's swollen and bruised. And she goes, yeah, you tore something.
Mm.
And she's like, yeah, this is pretty bad. And it was interesting because she was, kind of mean to other people that came because she felt like, a lot of people just really wanted to go home. But she saw I was really injured, so she wasn't mean to me. And she was like, do you want
Right.
to go home? And I was like, no, I can't afford to go home. And so she was like, well, just keep coming back here in the mornings. Like, she's
Mm-hmm.
like, we'll get the swelling down. We'll try to rehab it. She thought that I had a torn LCL, which is kind of the ligament on the side, I guess. And
Okay.
so that's what she thought. And she was like, well, she's like, it can heal, but she's like, it's not going to heal here. And
Mm.
so I kept coming. I kept, in the morning and whatnot, like every other day or something for like a week. I went and I, rehabbed with her. And then it got kind of close to me missing too many days of stuff in the morning,
Mm-hmm.
sometimes. And so
Mm-hmm.
she gave me a wrap and gave me a knee brace. She ordered me a knee brace, and I just kind of kept trucking. And I just kept going. And, I ended up finishing basic training. I did all 9 weeks. I was still in pain, but by like the ninth week, by that point, I was kind of used to it. I was able to pass PT. I did everything I needed to do, but of
Mm-hmm.
course, everything was harder. It wasn't until I got back home and I went to my unit
Right.
and they told me I was supposed to go to
Mm-hmm.
OCS, Officer Candidate School, to commission as an officer.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't until I went to my unit, they were like, look, before you go to OCS, because that's going to be rough, you need to go see what it
Mm-hmm.
is. So I went to a military doctor. The military doctor tells me that, like, oh, well, your leg is probably, it's fine. He's like, it is, you couldn't finish basic training with a torn ligament. So he sends me to physical therapy. I do that,
Mm-hmm.
but something's still wrong with my leg. I can run, I can do everything
Mm-hmm.
else at this point, but it's still kind of weak. So finally I go to a civilian doctor. Civilian doctor orders an MRI and he calls me back the next day and he says, you have a torn ACL. And he said, we'll schedule surgery for next week.
Wow.
So yeah. And I asked him, I was like, was it partially torn? And he was like, yeah. And he said, it was fully, he said, no, it wasn't partially torn. It was fully torn. And he said, I
Wow.
ended up telling one of my battle buddies in the Army, I was like, yeah, I have a torn ACL because he was with me. He was my bunkmate, and he
Mm-hmm.
said, dude, you went through basic training with a torn ACL. He's like, you are one tough SOB. But so going back to that original prayer, looking back on it, like God really did make me stronger and tougher and wiser. I learned a lot from being in that situation, from being vulnerable, from not knowing if I was gonna go home and
Mm-hmm.
gonna finish. And I really did learn a lot,
Yeah.
and I was better for it.
Yeah. Yeah. That's amazing. I don't know too many people that would have been able to finish with that kind of pain just radiating through their body, um, because when you're in that amount of pain, it's not just that localized kind of pain. That kind of pain starts to radiate through your entire body when your pain
Yeah.
level gets at a certain threshold. And so now you went to law school. You went to
Hmm.
law school, and what made you decide to go to law school?
So I had been thinking about going to law school for a while. I just didn't think,
Hmm.
my grades in undergrad. I was like, I probably need to go back to school and pull up my GPA. And I really didn't understand the process because I didn't really get student loans that like in undergrad for real. So it was kind of like I really don't know, but I want to do it. I'm not sure. But then when I started working at the public defender's office in Birmingham, Alabama, and I really enjoyed it. I liked it. I liked it a lot. It was still kind of, I still wanted to go to law school, and
Hmm.
but I was like, oh, I'll stay and I'll do this until I get ready. And I started talking to some attorneys about it, and they were all encouraging. And I had there was a friend. She's a friend now. She was an intern there, and she kind of we were talking one day, and I was talking to her about I was thinking about taking the LSAT, to get into law school. And she was like, "What are you waiting on?" She was like, "What are you waiting on?" And I was like, "Oh, okay, all right, well, fine, I'll go ahead and take it." So I went ahead and signed up for it and took it. Um, it was a lot of things that just kind of nudged me to go ahead and do it. That was one. One was we got a new public defender, and
Hmm.
he was kind of terrible. But yeah, I decided, you know what, I'm going to go ahead and do it because investigating these cases, you can only do so much, and I want to have a larger hand in really trying to help people, and understanding more about the law
Yeah.
from that end instead of just finding out the facts of the situation. So yeah, that spurred me on to go
Yeah.
ahead and do
Yeah.
it.
And so when are you expecting to hear whether or not you passed the bar?
End of April. End of April. The results should
Okay.
be in. Yeah.
Okay. So we're going to be biting our nails with you until we all hear the results. Let's shift now into your TikTok presence. A lot of your videos caught my attention, um, and you have a pretty big platform on TikTok. And I want to ask you, what made you go in the direction that you went in with your topics and your content that you talk about on TikTok?
Hmm. Yeah, I think when I started TikTok, I really didn't know what direction I wanted to go in. I just kind of thought, I want to share some things, maybe some stories, maybe some thoughts, maybe some opinions about stuff, and maybe start to have conversations with people. Well, we'll see. And I'm into history as well, and so I thought, well, maybe
Hmm.
I'll do some history and talk about that. Um,
Hmm.
but what happened was is that I started to see, the algorithm is taking me to places where I see people discussing a lot of issues concerning Black people.
Hmm.
Black men, Black women, Black relationships, all
Hmm.
of that stuff. And the one thing that I've never had patience for, and I don't have a large following compared to some people. Like I don't have like 10,000 followers yet, but I'm it's
Right.
growing slowly. But I do think
Hmm.
Um, I saw a lot of people bashing black women and black men, just going at each other.
Hmm.
And that bothers my soul so much. It irks my nerves. I can't tolerate it. And so it kind of morphed into that as I started to speak out on that
Hmm.
more. Just,
Mm-hmm.
initially, I think the first video I did about it was like me really just kind of standing up for Black women because
Mm-hmm.
some of the nonsense that I was seeing was attacking Black women. And so
Yeah.
I defend Black women. And of course, if people think that if you defend something, they mistake
Right.
thinking that you're defending something as you being against something else. So some people think that, oh,
Exactly.
well, he's defending Black women, he must be against Black men. No, I'm not at all. Um, but eventually, the same thing started in the other direction because if people started attacking Black men, I could speak up for and defend Black men, and then people got offended and they felt like, well, you're just doing this and you're not acknowledging this reality. And I'm like, no, what it is like, I think a lot of people are just hurt and angry and they don't know how to
Yeah.
express that.
Yeah.
And the
I
bigger
agree
the
with
biggest issue, yeah, and the biggest issue for me is that a lot of these people, and
you.
Black men and Black women, they say things and they mimic racist and they use the same talking points as white supremacists. And
Mm-hmm.
I've seen it, and I've seen it online. I've heard it in person. I understand
Mm-hmm.
what white supremacy sounds like. And these people sometimes,
Mm-hmm.
because they're so angry and they're so hurt, they will use the same rhetoric to describe Black men and Black women. And
Yeah.
to me, I feel like that's unacceptable.
Yeah. Yeah. It is. It really is. So we're gonna take a listen to a few of your videos. I picked out three that I thought were very important. The first one, um, you talked about the title is Rejecting Means Men's Emotions. And I just took from that men need to feel safe before they are able to be vulnerable. Um, so we're going to listen to that one, and then I'll let you give your commentary.
All right.
Hold on.
We're not used to them being so expressive and will outright either reject those emotions. This is something that I've said
Hold on, guys.
for a long time, and I've said it
Okay,
on my
so
page. And understand.
apparently, someone posted a comment on this particular video. It says, no one other men have told men they can't talk. So maybe have a man meeting. And then she gives the thumbs up. Yeah, it's a lady because I see her picture. And let's take a listen.
Expressive and will outright either reject those emotions. This is something that I've said for a long time, and I've said it on my page. And understand, this is not me blaming women at all, but there is a narrative that men do not express themselves in a healthy way, and that everything would just be great if men could do so. But I guarantee you that there are men that you know who have attempted or tried to express themselves emotionally to people, including women, and that has been rejected and dismissed, or they were made fun of. Now, I advocate for women a lot on my page, but some people don't like it when I give men grace. But this is a real and factual problem. And it's often dismissed because we live in a patriarchy and people are like, oh, well, men have the privilege, so this is a problem with the patriarchy. That does nothing to help the individual who is living within that system that he did not set up. And I do not believe that just because a person is a member of a group that, generally speaking, has a certain amount of privilege that other people do not have, that they should not get at least some level of sympathy and compassion, because they are still people. And just like everybody else, they are walking around this world blind and stumbling over things and often doing the best that they can. But I digress. Yes, men need therapy. We absolutely need to go to therapy more. The amount of men of every race, ethnicity, nationality, or whatever that do not or just refuse to go to therapy is too damn high. But If a man does and is willing to put in the work, and then he comes back and he expresses himself in a healthy way, whether he's right or wrong, if he expresses those feelings and he is criticized for it, rejected, dismissed, or whatever, you are part of the problem. And I would say that most men who have at least some level of emotional intelligence have been there before. They have expressed themselves to women. It did not go well. They were dismissed. They were called emotional. They were called too sensitive. It happens. Now, personally, I like to think that I have a pretty high level of emotional intelligence. So it's not uncommon for me to have a conversation with a woman, a difficult conversation with a woman, and then to realize that she is not capable of having the same type of emotional conversation that I am. I'm pretty self-reflective. I'm introspective. I understand how I feel about things the vast majority of the time, so much so that I've had to walk people through their emotions. But the amount of negative responses that I've gotten because of that over the years is too damn high.
Who are not used to them being so expressive and will outright either reject those emotions.
This is something that I've said for a long.
All right. Tell us what led you to that conclusion.
Yeah, it's just my experience, as as a man, as a black man who understands his emotions. I know from firsthand experience that I have, whether friends or whether with somebody I was dating. Um, the thing is that being a person who can articulate their emotions and feelings and express how they feel about
Mhm.
something, even in a healthy way, as a black man, is kind of rare.
Yeah.
And people don't know how to take that. And we have
Mhm.
been conditioned so much to think that if a man does this, especially if he's a black man, if a black man does this, then he's whining, he's sensitive, he's, something negative, he's too emotional, he's too soft or whatever. And it's not even like this happens a lot, you know what I mean? Because I grew up in a
Right.
household and my daddy is, the consummate I don't talk about my feelings like this type of person, right?
Right.
Not a talker, this is him. So I grew up like that, but I understood that there's value in being able to talk through your emotions. But it's not just
Right.
me. I've seen it from other men, from homeboys, friends, associates. It's not received well. And
Mhm.
men are punished for being vulnerable, which is one reason that some of us learn early on that it's sometimes better to just pretend like you're not vulnerable at all, like you don't care,
Mhm.
and because
Right.
you can be punished for it emotionally, and nobody wants that.
Now, who's punishing them?
I often it's and I don't want to seem like I'm blaming like women, but often it is the women in their lives. You know what I mean? And it is men sometimes as
Okay.
well. It's men, they have homeboys who are like, oh man, stop being a punk, stop being this. Like you have that, right? But
Yeah.
from what I've seen from firsthand experience, um, when it comes to women that they're dating, women that they may like, women that they, are cool with,
Mhm.
especially if they did something. Excuse me, if they did something and the guys are trying to address it with them, um,
Okay.
then though they like I said, they're punished. Whether it's like if it's a woman that a guy's dating, and I've seen this with friends, he's trying to express himself or whatever, and maybe she's hurt too, but I've seen where they're completely dismissive of him being vulnerable. I know of a situation where
Yeah.
somebody that I knew, and this is just an example, this was years ago, but somebody that I knew recorded a phone conversation of, I think it was her ex-husband or her husband at the time. They were going through some issues.
Mhm.
And he
Mhm.
called and left a message, and he was upset, he was crying. And it wasn't even like he did anything like super terrible to my knowledge, but she played it for other people that came over. Played him being vulnerable and being honest and crying on the phone to
Right.
other people, for anybody that came over to hear, you know, family, friends, or whoever. And I heard it. I was there because I was there with somebody one time hanging out, and she played it, and I just thought, like, this is, why would you do this? You know, why would you put
Right.
this man on blast like this for him being vulnerable? And
Right.
he wasn't disrespectful. He wasn't, you know, he was just hurt.
Right.
And I don't think people really understand that how men respond to things. It's not like men
Mhm.
often, you know, we like to think that we're practical, and a lot of times we are, but one of the things that we do is that if you hurt somebody bad enough, it's a wrap. The next thing that you may hear from him from then on out is, I don't care, you
Yeah.
know, because he's going to do whatever he can to protect himself. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. So, so Con, what would be the number one thing that a woman could do to make her man feel comfortable enough to become vulnerable with her?
First and foremost, listen. You know, listening is it's an underrated skill for everybody. But first
Hmm.
thing is listen. And yeah, if he's not good at expressing himself, you may have to read between the lines, right? And I understand that
Right.
may not be fair, but you may have to try that. But
Right.
listen to what he's saying. Try to figure out what it is he wants, and when he's being vulnerable, if he has that moment of vulnerability, and he's sharing with you whether it's an insecurity or whatever, listen. If he's hurt, listen, and don't use it against him. Don't
Right.
automatically be defensive, you know. and
Right.
and, and this goes for anything and anybody in any relationship. One of the most toxic things anybody can do is if they have an argument or disagreement or anything like that with somebody, whether a dating relationship or even a friend, is
Right.
to try to be right, to just try to
Mm.
focus on being right and being defensive and being right.
Right.
It's not about being right.
Mhm.
If you go into an argument with somebody, you or disagreement, anything, and you care about this
Mhm.
person, even if you don't understand what it is that this person is upset about, right? If you don't, it doesn't make sense to you. And so you can't
Mhm.
care about it because you don't understand it. You can at least
Right.
care about how this person feels.
Mhm.
And so the best thing to do is to be solution oriented. This happened.
Mhm.
You feel this way.
Mhm.
I didn't mean to do it. I made a mistake. I'm sorry. Let me listen to you. Let me hear you. And then
Mhm.
let's figure out how we can get past this.
Right. Right.
Because yeah, if you really just if you focus on people, you know, you've seen it, people get mad and they get into an argument, and then it's about, well, you
Mm.
did this and you did that, and you get tit for tat, and they get nowhere. And the problem's not solved. And then they have
Yeah.
another argument, and then it comes
Right.
back up again, you know, or somebody brings up
Yeah.
something that they said, you know, as an insecurity or in a moment that they were vulnerable. Like, well, this is why you so and so, or this is
Yeah.
this. No, you don't do that. You try to
Yeah.
get to a solution, and it still may come up
Mhm.
again. It may not solve it then, but you're working
Right.
on it. You're ironing it out because you're still learning and figuring each other out. You know, look, I've been
Right.
married for, it'll be going on 19 years this year.
Mhm.
And you know, this is something that I have to do. I had to learn that. And you
Mhm.
know, I'm I'm a little better at it than than she is, but like it is one of
Mhm.
those things where it's like, hey, it's about how do we get past this, not about who's
Mhm.
right and wrong. You know,
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
yeah,
One of the
respecting the
things
other
I
person's
often,
vulnerability. Mhm.
yeah, yeah. I think one of the things that when I'm talking to women, I think one of the key things that I try to tell them that men need to become vulnerable is accountability. You know, they need for us to be accountable for what they're telling us. For instance, if we'll use a scenario, okay, we had an argument and previously you told me something in a vulnerable moment, But then when we get into an argument, I'm gonna pull that ace out my back pocket and use it against you, because I know that's gonna hurt you, because you just called me out on some of my stuff. So I got to dig deep enough to call you out on some of your stuff, because I don't want to be held accountable. So
Right.
I think when we do that, I think sometimes that's an automatic shutdown for a man, because
Hmm.
now he's not going to trust you anymore. And
Right.
once that trust is there, you're going to have to almost pry his lips open, pry his heart open again, pry his emotions open again for him to become that vulnerable again, so that he will just open up to you.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. You
Yeah.
cannot weaponize somebody else's feelings and use it against them, and then
Yeah.
expect for them to trust you after that. You know.
Right. Right.
And look, and I understand that some people can have so many insecurities that it gets tiresome to try to manage that. Right. I
Yeah.
understand that. Sometimes only therapy can help with some of that stuff. But
Mm-hmm.
people, you can't use it against somebody, and you also can't be the type of person that never admits that they do anything wrong. If you are the
Right.
type of person that you think you're always right and you never do anything wrong, or you don't
Mm-hmm.
think whatever you did is that bad, you are absolutely
Mm-hmm.
part of the problem, because
Yep.
everybody
Absolutely.
everybody does something wrong, even if you didn't start it. And this is something that comes up, like, that I realized years ago, is that I would
Mm-hmm.
have to sometimes walk my wife through emotions or whatever, because she's
Mm-hmm.
not as good at expressing it as I was. And some of that is,
Mm-hmm.
I have to walk through walk her through how she feels, and like really try to understand it, and get into understand it, right? But then have to acknowledge, like, how I'm at fault partially for whatever it is, because
Right.
maybe I did something, whether unintentionally or not, and then it got a negative reaction out of her, and then her
And
reaction
then,
bothered me. So then
right.
I'm still partially at fault, but she also has to take responsibility for what she did in response to that. Just because somebody else started it
Right.
doesn't absolve you from responsibility as well. So you can have a situation where both people are mutually responsible for the escalation and the problem, in the argument, right? And
Yeah.
one way
Mm-hmm.
to never get to the bottom of it is never admit that you were wrong, never admit that you did anything wrong.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Relationship is probably going to fail at some point.
Yeah. Yeah. I know when I'm having those heartfelt moments with a gentleman, and I'm like, listen, I don't need to be right, but I need to be heard. I
Right.
need you to hear me, you know.
Right.
And that's pretty much how I deal with that component of communication.
Hmm.
This next video, you came out swinging pretty hard. This next video is talking about men, we need to throw the trash out.
Hmm.
You came out swinging pretty hard, but this gentleman left you no choice but to go there because of the foolishness he was talking about. All right, guys, let's listen to this. Hold on.
For some children, I told them I did not want. So for some years now, some of them been trying to get in contact with me, access denied. Cause I don't really know why you trying to get in contact with me. I done told you I did not want them kids. So don't expect me to be responsible financially, emotional, spiritually, mentally, or physically with some kids I do not want. And I don't give a fuck. This weekend, I was told a story about an individual who, I don't want to give too many details, but essentially, one night stand, baby, and this person was like, child support or visitation. It's either or. And all I could think was, what the hell is wrong with you? I have no patience for people who harm kids, people who neglect and abandon kids. No patience for it whatsoever. And I'm somebody that understands patterns of behavior. I understand behaviors of collective groups because of different situations, because of traumas, because of past history, influence, environmental factors, all of that. I get it. But I just have no patience for people who don't want to take care of their children and be in their kids' lives. None. The quickest way to show me that you trash, do that. Do it. And I'll know that you're a piece of shit. And one time I made a statement about this on Facebook some years ago, and somebody responded, well, sometimes the woman will make his life crazy or whatever, or be a living. I don't give a flying 747 fuck. I don't. There's no excuse. Because what it boils down to is, what are you willing to sacrifice for the benefit of your children? Should be the most valuable thing that you have. What are you willing to give up? What are you willing to go through? You shouldn't have to. Honestly, yeah, that's facts. But I'm going to fight, struggle tooth and nail to do whatever I can to help and benefit my kids, and for me to be there to make sure that they have my influence and guidance. Now, this sociopathic level of behavior that we see in this video, a lot of people are responding and saying like, oh, women, like, be careful, you need to pick better, you need to do this and all of this other stuff. Sure, everybody involved in that situation is clearly irresponsible. Everybody, nobody is unscathed. But that's not the point. Because at the very least, at least from what we understand, if this is true, some of them are at least trying to take care of their kids. And look, as long as people are breathing, people will be irresponsible. It's reality. You've been irresponsible, I've been irresponsible, we just been probably irresponsible in different ways. But it's happened. But once you are irresponsible, there comes consequences. And yeah, the consequences of them being irresponsible are they have a kid, and they have a kid with a guy who is not going to take care of it. But there's a certain level of responsibility that they have to accept. He's not accepting shit. Nothing. He doesn't care. People like him damage the community. They damage society. They damage the environment. And any man out there who is excusing this type of behavior, you need to have several seats. Because we can't fix and improve our community until we start holding people like this accountable. You, as a man, any man who says he cares, pretends, I don't care, acts, it is our responsibility to teach, preach, and demonstrate better behavior than this piece of trash right here. We all have a responsibility to do better. There's only so much we can do, but we all have a responsibility to do better and to hold people like this accountable. I'm sure he's got friends. I'm sure he's got homeboys. I can't be cool with somebody like that. I can't. You're not going to be in my vicinity. And I get it. Some people don't know how to be fathers because they were never shown. You got to at least make the effort. You need to do whatever you can to learn what you should do, and then try your best to meet that standard. Because this ain't it. This is not it. Y'all got to do better. It's terrible. It's counterproductive. There's nothing that should be acceptable about this. I'm sorry. Not taking care of your kids is the one thing that pisses me off, and I feel like there's no excuse for. And the only excuse really is if you have issues that you know that you have to deal with, you go deal with them and then you come back. And lastly, what really irks me about this is that I know good people, good men, good fathers, and they're black, who genuinely make every attempt and would be there. For example, I got my cousin, her ex-husband was killed in a car accident 20 years ago. He had a son and he had a daughter on the way. Never got to be there for him, not in a meaningful way. I know a guy right now, Army buddy, who is going through it health-wise because of something. Great husband, great father, great dude. And I hope and pray that he gets back to 100%. 2 young kids, great dude, good leader. And then we got pieces of shit like this dude. I don't have the patience for y'all.
For some children, I told them I did not want. So for some years now,
So
some of them been trying to get in contact with me.
So this guy has 7 kids, 7 baby mamas. He doesn't want to take care of any of the children because he told the mothers that he didn't want any of the babies. So now apparently the mothers are trying to get in contact with him, and he's not helping any because he told them from the beginning, I guess when he found out they were pregnant, he didn't want the children. And I guess he feels proud enough to make a video about that. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, it's just an embarrassment. Like he clearly has no shame whatsoever.
But what I do know, it struck a nerve in you.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, it
I could
did.
see that. And you gave some really good advice for us as women to pay attention to. And I hope when women hear this, they listen and they take these words into consideration, because no one can tell you how a man thinks like another man can. And then it's to the warnings and take heed to the information that we're given. Or if we say, well, you know, I'm grown, I don't need a man to tell me how to be a woman and all of this stuff. But I think you gave some really good advice in this next clip.
The men who came at me immediately making things sexual.
Y'all ignore my study page back there. Guess I should take it down. But when I used to give advice to women about dating, I would always say and maintain that if he brings up sex too early, it's an absolute red flag. Red flag. At the very least, at minimum, it's a yellow flag. Because depending on how forceful he is about it and how forward and direct, he's not trying to get to know you. That's really at the forefront of his mind. Maybe, at best, he's just exploring his options. But at the end of the day, this is what he wants. He's not really trying to learn about you if you'll give it up. He's not really willing to put in the work. It's also possible that he lacks patience. He lacks self-control. He doesn't wait to read a situation. There's a lot that you can read into that, but it's all a red flag. Now, I'm not saying that if she initiates it and he says yes, that's different. But if he initiates it where he's already going that way and he just met you, red flag. I've never seen it turn into anything meaningful.
The men who came at me immediately.
Let me ask you this then, Khan. Do you feel like if a woman brings up sex too early on in the dating process, then is she a red flag also?
You know, honestly, she could be. Like it very, very well like may be the case. Um, that she
Mm-hmm.
could be a red flag. But here's the thing about that, and this is just from my experience, right? And I know that everybody's different. But from what I've seen from,
Mm-hmm.
friends and for all the years that I've been around, I know I know women and I've been cool with women who will bring it up and they will be willing to do it and have sex on the first night. But
Mm-hmm.
they also will still want a relationship. They won't hold it
Okay.
against the man typically, you know? So
Mm-hmm.
even if they do it, they still like I know people that will like I know people that have and I know women that have issues with self-control big time. And they're like,
Mm-hmm.
yes, I'll still do it. I'll do it or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
They may have a hard time saying no. Some of them they just don't care and they don't hold it against them. And that's fine. But they still like, okay, I'm still open to a
Mm-hmm.
relationship with this person. Men, on the other hand,
Mm-hmm.
on average, we tend to be a little different. And
Okay.
men sometimes, even though they will do it, I've seen and know men that will hold it against the woman if she does it
Mm-hmm.
first. Because they're looking at that as a metric. Like, okay, if it was this easy for me, how easy is it for somebody else? And that's not,
Yeah.
I'm not justifying or defending
Yeah.
that, but that's the thought process. I know dudes,
Right.
I've
Right.
seen
Right.
dudes.
No, no, no. I've heard that before. Uh-huh.
Yeah.
I've heard men say that before. Not about me, of course, but I've heard men say that mode of thinking before. Um, that if it was that easy for him, it's got to have been that easy for the next person.
Right.
Versus someone that he had to actually pursue for months or years. Um, Whereas he just met you and you already in the bathroom, in the parking lot, or at his house or whatever,
Hmm.
y'all just first night meeting,
Right.
you know.
Right.
And so it does raise a question um, in the man's mind. And I know a lot of people listening might say, well, isn't that feeding into the double standard
Hmm.
um, between men and women? What would you say to that?
It's it is feeding into the double standard, but and that's true. Like I can't dispute that. It absolutely is. But here's the question you got to ask yourself: are you going to change the double standard? So, are
Hmm.
you, as a woman, going to be able to change the way that this man thinks about this situation? Are you going to be able
Hmm.
to change the way that men in general think about this?
Hmm.
So I think with each individual, they have to weigh the options. They say either I can fight against this double standard and keep doing what I'm doing because I want to do it. Cool, fine, more power to you, no judgment. Or you can say, well, this is the reality. This double standard exists, and it's a reality with some people. And maybe I want to tailor my behavior to it to
Hmm.
for that, or not. It's up to you. But it is a
Hmm.
reality that a lot of men think like that, and it's also a reality that a lot of men still think like that, but won't say anything. You know, and
Mm.
I'm not saying that every man does this. Of course, there's plenty of dudes that don't care. You know,
Hmm.
um, but the vast majority of what I've seen and from dudes that I know, from women that I know, is that if a man does that, often feels like I've gotten what I wanted out of the situation. It's just a matter of if I want to keep doing it, you know? And if he
Wow.
brings up sex too early, it's like, all right, do I want to keep doing it? Because the thing is too, and I've seen this 1,000 times, if a man
Hmm.
you have sex, he brings it up, he initiates, you have sex with him, and then he's not focused on getting to know you. He's not focused on building a relationship. I just want to keep doing what we're doing. Like we don't have to put a label on it. We don't have to do this. Let me come through and kick it. Then he's not trying to put it in the work.
Hmm.
And I say this as a man. And again, and I understand the double
Hmm.
standard exists, but you have
Hmm.
to understand how men view sex. Men
Okay.
often view sex differently than women. That's why men view sex with women and how many women we can get as an accomplishment, as a conquest, as and in some cases something that they are entitled to, and
Mm-hmm.
which is wrong. But that's the
Mm-hmm.
mentality for men. It's not like it's not all men, of course, because but they are like,
Right.
well, if I can get this, I can win this. I've gotten the prize out of the situation. Because men in society honestly aren't taught to
Mm-hmm.
view women themselves as the prize and as the accomplishment. But we are taught to view sex that way.
Right.
So, and
Right.
sadly
Right.
enough, and this is tragic, and I think we do have to change this mentality that we view women
Mm-hmm.
as a byproduct of sex sometimes. And in
Mm-hmm.
order for a man to really be impressed, I
Mm-hmm.
mean, like the woman really has to show him that she's different. A lot of men are looking for that, whether they're different or not. They could be basic as our get out, but a lot of times men are really trying to like figure out, is she different from everybody else that I've dealt with? You know, is
Mm-hmm.
she special? What is she gonna do that's different? Because sometimes they feel entitled to it. So I think the double standard exists, but you just have to decide how you want to approach it and how you want to deal with it. And real quick, I got a story from a
Okay.
former friend of mine from years ago, and we actually
Mm-hmm.
worked together too. He met a girl. She was working. He tried to holler at her. He really tried to he pursued her, hollered at her, and she told him that she was born again celibate, and
Okay.
he was like, oh, okay, cool, and he wasn't like a super religious person, but he was like, all right, whatever. And so then when they went out on the date,
Mm-hmm.
she ended up sleeping with him. And and I mean, first date. And he ended up, she really was invested in him. She wanted him to meet her parents and everything else. And guess what he did? He cut it off. So
Yeah.
yeah, he cut it off because here she was making this declaration that, well, I'm born again celibate. I'm trying to do better. I'm trying to do this. And then you kind of go back on it. And even if he didn't
Yeah.
consciously say like, "Oh, I'm done with," like, "Oh, well, like she's this and that," he made that judgment in his head, you know.
Yeah.
So yeah,
So
it
but
happened.
did he initiate? Did he initiate the sex, or did she?
He did. He did.
So was it a setup to see if she would?
I don't think he did it intentionally because I think he. I mean, he was gonna try it regardless, but I don't
Right.
think he did it as a setup. I think he just wanted to, because that's kind of what he
Mm.
wanted in the first place. But
Yeah.
he wasn't but here's the thing about this particular guy. He wasn't opposed to a relationship. you know he wasn't opposed to a
Mm-hmm.
relationship because he was interested and open to it. But I think she, going back on what she said, when she gave her word on that,
Yeah.
she went back on it. She gave into him. I think he just kind of looked at it as like, well, she's not really, she's not somebody that's going to stick to her guns on something,
Yeah.
you know. And then now
Yeah.
she's super
Yeah.
invested. She wants me to meet her parents, and she really likes me and everything else. And he's just like, nah. But you know what was wild is that shortly after that, he met another young lady at the time, and he hollered at her, got her number, went out on a date. He didn't get where he wanted to get, of course, and he was really
Right.
bothered by that. He kept calling her and everything, and like he really wanted to go out with her again, and she just wasn't interested. And it irked him. He came
Right.
to work talking about it. He was like, "Man, He was like, "Man, like it's got me messed up. Like I really liked her and everything else, and but he couldn't." And she, told him no. Um,
Yeah.
but and you know what? And that triggers something else. Let me just say this: if and this goes for
Okay.
anybody, man and woman. But if you
Mm-hmm.
cannot say no, what good is your
Mm-hmm.
yes?
Wow. 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 That's a good question.
Hmm.
That's a good question. And one thing I do want to say, I don't know. I don't think the double standard will ever go away. Um,
Yeah.
Years and years ago, there was a gentleman that liked me, and um, but I would never go out with him. Um, didn't have any particular reason. Just my mind wasn't at that point at
Mm.
that time in my life, and so he wanted to have a conversation, and he wanted to share some things with me. So he said, I'm a man with a past, and um, he said, I've been with about 900 women, or a little bit over 900 women. He said, I've even been with a mother and daughter together. He said, but now I am born again. And he says, God has changed my life, and now I'm looking for a wife. And and he said, and I was wondering if you and I could have a conversation because I'm interested in you. So I said to him, I repeated what he said to make sure I heard him. I said, so did you say you slept with over 900 women? Some of them were mother daughter together. Um, but God has changed your life, and now you're born again, and now you're looking for a wife. He was like, yes. Then he asked me, could you accept that if I told you I was interested in you? So I sat there for a moment, and this is what I asked him. I said to him, if I told you that I had been with over 900 men, been with the father and son together at the same time, but now God has changed my life. I said, what would you think about that? He said, I would think you was a whore.
Mm.
My point exactly.
Right.
I said, my point exactly.
Mm.
I said, I think just like you think. And when I said that to him, he looked at me real strange for a while, just kept looking at me. And he said, you know what? Thank you for being honest with me. He said, most women, when I tell them what I do, what kind of work I do, who I work with, they say they can handle it just to be with me. He said, you're the first woman to reverse my questions. He said, I'm being honest with you. That is my lifestyle. That was my lifestyle. He said, but you're the first woman to call me out on it.
Mm.
Because I wanted to know,
Right.
if a woman tells a man that, he's not going to be ready to run to the altar with her.
Right.
900 men? Come on. No, he's not going to be ready to take her home to his family.
Right.
So I told him, I think like he thinks. And I think that's what we have to look at when we start talking about. I know women don't like the double standard, but it's still a man's world. It's still a man's world. We cannot go out there and do what men do and expect the same results. We just can't
Right.
do it. A man can go out there and have 900 concubines or whatever, and he's considered that guy. Woman go out there and have 900 men, she's considered a whore.
Mm. Yeah.
So, I think that when we come to double standards in any particular part of the male female gender, I think some of it we can come to the table and sit down and agree upon, but some of it, like you said, it just won't change. It's not going to change.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah,
And
it's not going to change.
I do think too that, and what you did was you held him accountable. You know what I mean? You held him to the same
Mm-hmm.
standard that he held you. And I think that's something that
Mm-hmm.
women can do as well. Um,
Mm-hmm.
because if a woman tries to change a man's perspective by saying, well, men do it, like why can't I do it? You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
That's not
Mm-hmm.
gonna really change his perspective. But if you hold him to
Right.
the same standard that you hold somebody else, right? Like you just did in
Mm-hmm.
that situation, that's
Mm-hmm.
that's different. That's gonna force him to
Mm-hmm.
think, you know,
Mm-hmm.
because one is saying, well, this is I don't really one is saying I am going out and I'm doing XYZ. You do it, why can't
Mm-hmm.
I do it? That
Mm-hmm.
is only going to have limited impact. And I get it. It's fine. You absolutely can do whatever you want. It's a free country, your body, do whatever. That no judgment.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not going to change him. And nothing may change him. But at the very least, you hold men to that same standard.
Mm-hmm.
If women were
Mm-hmm.
to start asking and rejecting men, this whole body count discussion, is happening all the time on social media. And it always is like real one-sided. Men are
Mm-hmm.
like, well, it matters to me. And women are like, it shouldn't matter, and you shouldn't ask about it, and you shouldn't do this. Well, one thing that women can also do is hold men accountable to that same standard. What's your body count?
Mm-hmm.
And
Right.
tell a man, basically, you told this man no because, of all the things that he had done. And
Mm-hmm.
if that happened more men would be like, all right, hey, we need to get rid of this. Like, we can't be judging people based off of this because
Yeah.
you holding them to the same standard. But you're right to an
Mm-hmm.
extent. I don't think any of it is going to change. This is how the society, sees it. I think it can get
Mm-hmm.
better, but I really don't think the answer is just for everybody to just start being irresponsible. You know, um,
Right. Right.
like that particular gentleman. He lived that lifestyle. It was great if he changed his life, but um, that to a certain extent, beyond a certain level, some people are being irresponsible. And I know a ton of people that are irresponsible, a bunch of people that have no restraint and self-control. And
Yeah.
it's not just a matter and you look, and some people they can do it and they say they feel great, but then there's a lot of people that don't. They're not happy with that.
Mm-hmm.
And I know people that want a relationship and they've always wanted one, or they wanted one for a while and they just can't get out of those, out of habits that kind of keep them from, being in a relationship. So,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
yeah, people,
You
people
mean
really
being
just,
in a committed relationship?
right. In a committed relationship, yeah. So,
Oh, okay.
um,
Okay.
I
I
tell
see
people,
what
I
you're
tell
saying.
people this.
Okay.
Yeah. I tell people this. It's like this. In your past, regardless of what it is, and regardless of whether it's right and wrong, your past is going to lead to your future. It's going to
Right.
impact your future. There are things that you have done when you were younger that will have
Mm-hmm.
consequences later down the line. Whether it's right or
Yeah.
wrong, it is the reality of the situation. Everybody has
Yeah.
choices that they wish they could take back. So young people
This is true.
specifically need to think about that.
This is
Yeah.
true. This is very true. And unfortunately, you can't. How do you say? Undo time. You
Right.
know, that's something unfortunate. You just cannot undo what's already been done.
Yeah.
So, listen, Con, I thank you. I appreciate you being on our show. Okay, you said April. Let me write this date down on your paper. April.
April 21st, I think, is
What's
the
the
date.
date? 21st.
Mhm.
All right. I'm gonna put that on my calendar so we'll know. Now, when you pass, you got to come back on the show so we can celebrate with you. Okay?
All right, will do. I appreciate you having me. Thank you. I apologize for being late. That's my fault, but I appreciate it. Thank you.
I think I may have sent you the wrong link, so it might have been my fault. So, but it's okay. We got it together.
Yeah.
All right, Con.
All
I'll be
right.
talking with you. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. All right. Bye
All
now.
right. My pleasure. Bye bye.